All right, so this is the February 22nd meeting of the Planning, Zoning, and Housing Committee of the RTM. So we have a few things that we need to do today. The first is there are three matters related to the leases on Great Island that we have been assigned as primary to. I don't think everyone here was on when we voted on the leases last time, so I'll just sort of maybe quickly summarize, but there are 6 residential properties on Great Island. Last year, we looked at 5 of the residential leases. There was one property, 18 Great Island, that we didn't look at, neither us nor the RTM looked at last year, because they had already signed an extension of their lease that went past the closing date. So the property was bought subject to that lease. So what the town is now doing is that lease is now coming up for renewal. They're going to renew that lease, same tenant, and that lease will go from, what we're voting on is going from, April 1st, 2024 until July 31st, 2025. At a rental rate of $9,000 per month. The lease is otherwise identical to what we voted on for the other 5 residential properties. One of the questions that I had myself was sort of the timing of extending these leases until 2025. And because one of the other things we'll be voting on is an extension, blanket extension for the other leases, are we limiting what the town can do with this property by having these residential tenants? I think it's worth noting the stable operator was unable to come to an agreement with the town. The stables will be moving as of the end of this month. And that actually means that one of the residential tenants will be moving because there was a residence that was used by the stable operator. So we're really now talking about a total of 5 residential leases, so 4 that had been approved before, and this one, the 18 Great Island. I talked with Monica about it, and she said that the Great Island Committee, and hopefully people are listening to Mark's reports and watching some of their committee meetings, but they're working on doing actually some bidding to bring someone in to help with the master plan for Great Island. And based on the schedule that they're looking at right now, it is unlikely that they will have any sort of master plan in place and ready to even be voted on, much less start working on, until sort of end of summer, fall of 2025, maybe even end of 2025. So that's the reason for this timing. It seems to fit with what's, at least according to what I've been told.
The question that I had in you was, why is the lease going to July? Notwithstanding what you just said, I wondered why it was going as far out as July versus just a 12-month period.
It is so that all the leases are now on the same time frame.
Thank you.
So basically, we're looking at 18 is going from April 1 till the end of July 2025. The extensions, which is the second item on our agenda, is to make all the other leases go until July 2025, the end of July. So then everything will, all of the leases will end July of 2025. So that's, any other questions,
No, I had the same
discussion?
question that you had about the timing.
The only question, just kind of going through it, and this is probably a standard thing that I just didn't quite understand, and now my phone is frozen. In the damages clause, it seemed, I don't know, I didn't quite understand it, where it says, we will repair any damages if it turns out that the damages were caused by the tenant or someone living there, then the tenant will take care of the charges. But then the last sentence said tenant is responsible for all repairs under $1,000, even though the paragraph before that made it sound like the lessors would be responsible for repairs. So that just seemed.
So yeah, that is sort of the kind of standard damages language. So basically, there are repairs that just need to be done, right, in your own house without
Changing
anything
a light
wrong.
Yeah, right, yeah.
And so so the tenant is solely responsible for repairs which cost less than $1,000 in any given instance. That's the standard repair language, so that's just for regular repairs. However, if the tenant is if the tenant causes damage to the property due to their own negligence, they're responsible for 100% of it, so even if it goes
The full
over
cost.
1,000.
Okay,
So that's like, if that's, if you have a rager and break all the windows.
Or
that
you
kind of
back
thing.
your car up into it, or whatever, yeah, right.
okay.
My story was funny.
Oh, yeah.
Back your car to it during the race.
Yes, exactly.
Thanks.
And does it have to be July 31st? I'm just thinking like, that'll be like high season,
Mhm.
and there'll be so many residents, July and August, like.
You mean so many residents of the town that want to be on the property?
Yes.
I mean, I think the question is, this sort of goes back to the master plan. I mean, I don't disagree with you. I would love to see people on the property more, but until the master plan is done and we have parking on the property, people, with the exception of the limited opening that they've done now, which is to let people park at Pear Tree and walk down there, they're basically what the Great Island Committee is saying is that they are not expecting substantial use of the property until the end of, until after the end of 2025, basically.
Yeah.
In addition to not having parking, there are no restroom facilities or other things, so I think there's more liability, which is why I think the committee is apprehensive about opening it up too much until some of those basics are able to be provided.
Correct. And they don't want to rush into putting anything in place until they have a chance to really have public input.
makes
So that's the point of doing this whole master plan process.
Then I totally get that. I would just think that they should just move it to like June 30th versus
Yeah.
July. But it does not gonna matter because of their,
I think that's, look, I'm totally fine with, that is what I've been told is the rationale for it. I think, that's part of what we need to be voting on, is if we think that's not a good use of town property, we can vote against and report negatively to the RTM on these leases for that reason. But that was why I wanted to get that answer from Monica directly as far as what their timing was for that very reason. Because I feel the same way, I'd like to get people on that property.
And just the committee that proposed, the Great Island Committee that proposed the dates for the extensions?
Well, the committee is advisory to the Board of Selectmen, and Monica McNally is now chair of the Great Island Committee. So it's not so much that they're proposing the dates as they're backing into the dates based on where they are in the process. So right now, they're actually working on a list of qualifications for the master plan person. Let me see, actually, you know what, I printed out her email. Okay, so they're looking at, so they're reviewing it towards the end of this month, and at the end of March, they expect to have the sort of qualifications done for the people that are gonna help them prepare the RFP for the master planning committee. And then they're gonna start working on the request for proposal, the RFP, in April of 2024. June of 2024, they expect to have their whoever's gonna do the master planning selected. And then they're saying a design process of 12 to 18 months, which gets us to end of the, sort of end of summer, fall 2025.
Okay.
So it's not so much, so I guess just so that I'm clear, it's not that the committee is saying we don't want people on until the end of 2025, it's that based on what the professionals have said, that's how long it's gonna take to get there.
Okay.
I don't like it, if I can be candid, but that's where there's a basis for those dates.
Without knowing the scope of the RFP, it's hard to know whether 12 to 18 months is the right number or the wrong number.
Right. But, they definitely it's going to be sort of like when they had that whole downtown study that they did a few years ago, I don't know if anyone remembers that, where they had everyone from the town came in and you put a little sticky on them what you thought were good uses and things like that. So it's gonna be a long process, I think, with a lot of public input.
Are you looking for a motion on the Pink House lease?
I don't wanna cut off any discussion, is there any more discussion for anyone? Okay, yeah, then I think.
I'll make a motion that we approve the extension of the Pink House or 18 Great Island lease.
I'll second.
All right, all in favor? All right, great. So then, the second thing that we need to vote on is, we've already sort of talked about a little bit, which is basically a blanket extension that can be used by the Board of Selectmen for any of the other leases. It is not clear whether everyone will want to extend, or if they'll want to extend all the way to July, the end of July 2025, but they're asking, so that they don't have to keep coming back to us on every individual lease. That's what they're asking for at this point. So that is just a straight extension along the terms of the existing leases.
If one of the tenants decided, well, I don't want it till July, I want it till May, would they then have to come back to us to renegotiate that?
No, not, since it would be shorter, they
Okay.
wouldn't need to, they would if it was longer.
Okay.
All right. Is there unless there's any discussion on that, we can probably just go straight to a motion on that one.
Make
All
a
right,
motion.
want to do it again?
I'll second it.
All right, all in favor? All right. The last piece is also a generic document to be used as needed on all of the leases, which is a pet addendum. There is in the existing leases some language about pets, but it's sort of limited. This pet addendum is much more expansive in terms of the rules and regulations. Really makes it very clear to the tenants what they're allowed to do, and also provides a process for enforcement if any of the rules are violated. I will say there was an interesting question raised during the Rules Committee, I thought, when they were discussing this, which was basically the people who live there will be allowed to have their pet on leash at all times and under their control, but they can, walk around outside with their dog. The way that these pet addendums are written, they can't have any dog visitors, and the way that the rules for the use of Great Island have been written, you can't bring your dog onto the property. So there is a little bit of a difference if you live there as opposed to being a regular townsperson. I don't know if that matters to anybody, I thought it was something that hadn't really been spoken about too much other than that, so I just wanted to bring that perspective
Do
to
any of the
people.
tenants currently have pets? My question
Yes.
would be, why do we need to do this? But
I know a couple do, I don't know if all of them do, but I happen to personally know that at least a couple of them do.
Well, I guess that would be problematic if all of a sudden you were trying to enforce those rules on people that already had pets, and then that would disrupt the lease, so they're probably just accommodating the fact that they have
Oh.
pets for now, even though it's a double standard in a way because the public can't use it. Like, what are you gonna, you know what I mean?
Oh, you mean the alternative would be to tell them that they
That they
can't
have
have
to
pets
leave.
either?
Yeah.
Right, true,
Right.
good point.
So,
So any other?
I mean, I don't care enough about it to make a formal, let me finish. I don't care enough about what I'm about to say to stop this in its tracks, but I would have, if I would have written it, I would have added something in with some even loose language describing the areas in which they can walk their pets, around their immediate rental property, because most of the houses have fairly discrete areas, rather than have them walking on the polo field with the dogs and having other town residents wanting to know why somebody who is walking their dog and doesn't know that they happen to be living in the pink house or the greenhouse or the White House or whatever it is. I don't feel strongly enough about it to oppose this, but I would have added that if I were.
well, that's actually a good point because you mentioned, I don't really know the property very well, but like you mentioned polo grounds. Are people gonna be utilizing those grounds, and would it be a disruption if someone was walking their animal there and that could create a conflict,
I don't know that it would be so much a disruption, that's just an opinion,
right?
as much as someone saying, well, why can't I?
Right, I think
Okay.
it's the way. So the
Yeah.
use of the property that, per the rules that have been put forward by the Great Island Committee for this pedestrian access that they're opening it up to in March, does say that any town residents are supposed to stay on the paved areas. So to your
Oh,
question,
I didn't realize that paved area, okay.
they're supposed to
Oh.
stay on the pathway.
Okay.
So it's really, you're really not supposed to go, picnic, you're not supposed to really do anything other than
Okay.
just go for a walk
Until
around
the
the
master
property.
plan is in
I
place.
was gonna say, how long is that supposed to last?
Probably 2 years.
I-
Really?
I think, I think that's gonna be a question for the Great Island Committee, but that's what's in place for right now.
And do you think maybe they need signage regarding the animals to say, no pets allowed except for those residents that?
My understanding is they are gonna put some signage up that's gonna
Okay.
clearly
Yeah, because
state, but not,
you don't want townspeople saying to
Oh, wait,
residents,
right,
like,
yeah, you're right.
you're not allowed to have your dog here, and then that being,
Right,
no,
and
I
then
am, because
being a
I, without,
confrontation.
yeah.
Yeah.
So you raised an interesting point though, that last sentence about except for people who live here. I think that might be something that we make a recommendation to the Great Island Committee that they consider adding to their signage. Because I know the signage just has rules about no pets, but I
Right,
don't
and
know
people
if
are
it
gonna
goes
be,
to
why
the
are they
level of
doing
detail.
Right, exactly,
Right,
like, I don't want,
right.
like, a townsperson walking down the street
Right.
or whatever and saying to a resident, like, you're not allowed, and that, and, well, yes, I am, and that can be a whole
Or
discussion.
them not saying anything to get clarification and making the assumption that people are doing it anyway and then they bring their pets.
Very,
Right, yeah.
very good point.
Right,
People are not
yeah.
gonna know them to be a resident, a neighbor.
Right, and just be like,
Exactly.
oh, I guess people are just bringing pets anyway. Oh, I saw someone walking their dog, we should bring them, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And look, I think,
Will the enforcement have to deal with that?
yeah, that's, I don't know who they've got in charge of enforcement, and, I personally would say to the, I think there, maybe some people need to communicate to the Great Island Committee that they disagree with the no pets. I've heard that from a lot of people, they don't understand why they can't walk their dog out there,
Well, I
so.
think part of the challenge would be if you can't walk on anything other than the paved area,
Yeah, you have.
generally you wanna have pets tend to wanna be on the
Yeah.
grass and
Yeah,
shoulders.
there's some,
They
It just sounds like liability
there's some
issues. They're
big
just- they
fields
just
that are
wanna-
gonna be very tempting.
That's right.
I kind of understand.
But as far as the pet addendum, which is what we're voting on, and I do think, look, I think these are all important things, and this sort of goes into actually what we're gonna be talking about next, which is sort of the role of our committee and where is that, there are a lot of sort of overlapping areas here, and I think making some of these recommendations, and I think that our committee could, as a group, make a recommendation to the Great Island Committee to reconsider some of these things, and we can discuss that further, but we do not have the authority to recommend any changes to these leases. That's either vote up or down on approving them, and when I say leases, I mean this addendum as well.
Is there gonna be someone positioned at the, entrance of, like they do at Weed and? Okay, because that could be sort of a point person to be like, oh, I'm sorry, you're not, you can't bring your pet in. That
These
might
are-
also be
These are
helpful.
good Great Island Commission
Okay.
questions,
Yeah,
or committee, or whatever,
Yeah,
advisory
yeah,
committee,
yeah.
committee, not commission, but yeah.
I mean, I guess if they're parking at Pear Tree, that person might be able to screen, but I don't know.
That's not our job.
Yeah, okay,
Beyond our pay grade.
okay.
So, any other discussion of the pet addendum? Anyone want to make a?
You're on a
motion to
roll,
approve?
what?
I will move that we approve the pet addendum.
I'll second it.
Making it easy for the minutes.
All in favor? All right. And I guess, because I think if we did want to do something, it would need to come from I guess, I would say for now, because I don't want to I don't think I can add things to the agenda, I would encourage all of us, to the extent you have opinions about some of these things, to, write, to send an email in to the Great Island Advisory Committee with your thoughts. And if we as a committee think that we want to make some recommendations to them, let me know, and then we can add that to the next agenda to have a discussion about if there's something we as a group feel like it's appropriate for us to
I
make
think
a
the things
recommendation
that
on.
we brought up today.
Yeah, but I don't want to make a recommendation if we haven't voted on it as a
Oh.
full group.
Okay, I got it.
So, but you can, as an individual.
I got it.
Every one of us can make recommendations as an individual. All right. Okay, so that's the sort of voting part that we needed to get to. So, you want to come join us?
Amy the first.
Yes, Amy the first, my predecessor. For those of you that don't know her, Amy Barsanti.
Hi guys.
How are you?
Familiar faces. How are you?
Amy was the chair of this committee before me, and I don't know, how long were you chair of this committee?
A couple of years, 3 years maybe?
Sorry.
Three. Vice chair before that, and then,
Okay.
yeah. And then,
And left us to join the Planning and Zoning Commission. So she has a very good perspective on the sort of distinctions between the roles of this committee and the commission and some of the other groups in town. And I wanted Amy to come in because I've personally gotten emails, both actually from people on this committee, and then I've gotten conversations from people outside that know that I'm the chair of this committee that are like, oh, when are you guys gonna talk about the Weed Beach Master Plan or Pear Tree, or whatever the one is that you guys just voted on? And when are you guys gonna talk about this thing or that? And that's not our job. And so I thought it would be helpful to have Amy sort of talk to us a little bit about those distinctions. Before I let you talk though, I wanna just sort of talk about, so basically, we are a subset of the RTM. So the RTM has its responsibilities are enacting ordinance and resolutions, determining, appropriation, so that's our main role, right, is power of the purse. Approve leasing, sale, or acquisition of real property by the town, which is what we've been involved with a lot with the Great Island stuff, and then otherwise act as a legislative body. So it's interesting, because then when you look at this, and this goes into, there's been some talk about amending Appendix B, which talks about each of the standing committees of the RTM, of which we're one. And the Appendix B almost makes it sound like we have more expansive responsibilities, because it talks about for planning, zoning, and housing, operations of town planning, zoning, building inspection, and public housing programs, including the adoption and enforcement of laws, rules, regulations affecting the same, and all related matters of administration, personnel, and finance. But that's, within what we're already allowed to do as the RTM. So even though that sounds broader, we don't really have as much responsibility as if you just read that, sort of seems to say that we have. So that's kind of
You mean it's not specific to us, it's more of a specific to the RTM in general?
Sorry, so basically, there's the RTM's duties.
Right.
And our duty as a committee can't go any further than what the RTM can do.
That's what you mean by, okay.
So even though
Yes.
this is very broadly written
Right.
in Appendix B,
Okay,
we can't,
I get
that doesn't give us more authority than the RTM
Got
had
it.
to give us,
Yeah.
because we're a subset of the RTM.
okay, thank you.
It ultimately comes to what Rules Committee has assigned to us
Yes.
for action.
Well, for action, correct, but, we do have some responsibility for oversight of, not necessarily making decisions about, but oversight of the other land use boards,
Correct.
and the building department and all the rest, and reporting to the RTM as needed on those items. So that sort of goes back to what I was saying, we could, on our own, because of something that's going on in the building department, bring something up. We can't, necessarily have a resolution, but we could bring that up to rules to be put on the agenda. So there's a little bit of give and take there, I think. So take it away.
I think one of the things that you hit on is a big thing about the power of the purse. The RTM is involved in appropriations, and your committee is involved, and obviously decisions that involve spending money, where the planning and zoning is not. I don't want to say we're money blind, but to some extent, that's not our major criteria. Where there's overlap are things with regards to regulations. So where you will be involved in evaluating the lease, the contents of the lease, a planning and zoning commission will be involved in, is it consistent with the town plan, conservation and development? And that's kind of the guiding light to say, is the purchase of Great Island, is the widening of the road, is there anything that's contrary to the plan that Darien does every 10 years? So that's kind of looking at it from two different angles. The lion's share of the planning and zoning commission work is a lot to do with regrading and coastal area management applications. So things that come forward, a neighbor wants to build a 6-foot wall retaining, change the grade in proximity to their neighbor, making sure that doesn't adversely affect the neighbor, making sure new developments have the adequate drainage studies done and drainage remediation. But where the overlap comes is in the governance of planning and zoning for the town of Darien. So things like the state requires a new regulation, we have the ability to opt out of either parking requirements or accessory dwelling units. We choose to opt out. You guys often are asked to ratify those decisions that we make.
Yeah, if I can interrupt on that, I think that's one of the interesting areas that I found sort of trying to figure out where the line is between the two, because basically, again, you know, it's like, we only have the power that the RTM gives us. Well, the RTM has the power that the state, that the town government and then the charter gives us, and then that the state gives each of the towns. So the state basically says, you can have zoning regulations. And then every once in a while, when the state tries to enforce certain things, that's where we get these opt-outs. So I'll talk about the accessory dwelling units, because that's sort of coming up right now. What's interesting to me is that the state said your RTM has to decide if you're gonna adopt the state regulations. And we as a town, if you remember, I don't know if it was a year ago, 2 years ago, our committee said, no, we wanna opt out, and we wanna let the Planning and Zoning Commission come up with its own regulations. So now, the Planning and Zoning Commission is coming up with its own regulations. It doesn't come back to us. We don't have any say in the regulations. All we got to do was say, we're not gonna adopt the state regulations. So that's why I've been sending out emails to you guys saying, I encourage you to go to the public
And
hearing.
we really, really want to hear,
Yeah.
we really want to hear what the public has to say.
And that's the March.
Are we saying we're not gonna adopt the state regulations and also giving permission for them to create their own, or just the?
We did that already.
No, but I'm
Yeah,
saying,
right.
the other half of that is not only are we not gonna adopt, but we're gonna empower or like, are we as the RTM empowering them to make their own regulations?
So in general, we already, that's, you know, sort of was done when zoning first came to be, but as part of the opt-out, the state requirement said if you opt out, the commission has to come up with its own regulation.
Okay.
So it was part and parcel of what we voted on before, was empowering them to do that.
So when you're rejecting that, you're also at the same time,
Correct.
right, okay.
So when I send out the email saying, and I think it's, what was it, March 7th?
It was supposed to be
Yeah, you've
during
got
a
it.
snow day.
Yeah, you've got it
So,
rescheduled though
we
for
rescheduled.
March, I think it's March 7th,
I believe you're
I've
correct.
sent out emails about it. But we're encouraged to go to that, but we are going each as individual
Residents.
taxpayers. Now, I think it's important that the members of this committee pay attention to things like that, which are major regulation changes, because, you know, we should, this sort of goes back to like, what is our role? We should have a little more knowledge about some of, you know, what's going on with sort of the planning and zoning side of things than, you know, just someone else, some other taxpayer who's not involved in town government. So that's where that overlap is, but there's a distinction.
And that's to me an important, really important thing, because there's, whether it's accessory dwelling units, whether it's multiple family parking requirements, there's always something brewing at the state level where they're interested in making new zoning changes that the municipalities then have to either adopt or opt out of or design their own, depending on what's allowed in regulations that get approved at the state level. So it's important to understand what's being considered at the state level, what might be coming down to the municipalities, and then what, if any, we have the ability to change on our own. So that is a narrative that was constantly unfolding and is very, very time consuming to pay attention to. So to the extent that you kind of can stay involved with that, that's great. And that's one of the reasons why I decided to go on the Planning and Zoning Commission, is because I think it's really important for municipalities to understand how they can control their own destiny. That's just my own personal opinion.
Question, Amy. So the whole discussion about ADUs started because the state
Yes.
wanted to
Yeah. The
mandate
state-
them
yeah.
here.
Yeah, the state had one size of, like a new regulation saying all municipalities must adopt yada, yada, yada. If you don't like yada, 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 your own individual municipality can opt out of it with I thought it was a 2/3 or vote at the RTM. The RTM, the selectmen said, the Planning and Zoning Commission said, yes, we'd like to design our own that makes sense for the town of Darien. The RTM agreed, they voted, and now the Planning and Zoning Commission is been this year developing a draft that we want to present to the public. That was supposed to happen during the last snow day. Now
Okay,
it's gonna be March 7th. So spread the word to anybody that's involved in what our first pass of what we
Okay.
believe makes sense for the town of Darien.
And I think it's important to note, so while we're talking about sort of regulation changes, that, like I said, I want to make sure I make the distinction that the Planning and Zoning Commission does have the ability to write its own regulations. So while this is a regulation change that is being proposed by the Planning and Zoning Commission for itself, and they're looking for public input on, there are often changes to the regulations that come about because of an individual applicant. An individual applicant will, a good example of that there was, an overlay zone for the Corbin district, there was a different zone proposed for all the Norton Heights developments. So one of the things I look at the planning and zoning agenda every time it comes up, and we'll try to send out, there hasn't been anything of note of late, but we'll send out to let you guys know that there is something coming up that the Planning and Zoning Commission is voting on that might be of interest, because it's gonna change the character of the town more than just somebody's application for a, stormwater management report.
And things like, for instance, Weed Beach, the town is proposing certain development at the parcel that they bought 2010, did they buy that parcel? A long time ago on Short Lane. And so, there's been many iterations and proposals, and the last one has been approved by the Planning and Zoning Commission. That just happened a couple weeks ago.
But that was a general meeting, not
That
a
was-
public hearing.
yeah. So those are the things that come in front of us as well, is major developments to any particular site, if it meets regulations, if it's asking for, exceptions to regulations. Not to be confused with the zoning board of appeals, which is a homeowner that wants to build a new addition and encroaching five inches over his setback line. That's not planning and zoning
That's
commission,
different.
that's
That's a variance.
a variance.
And I think as far as development of town property, what's interesting is that there's a role for the Park and Rec Commission, if we're talking about park property. There's a role for the Planning and Zoning Commission, because they're looking at, and as Amy said, they're not looking at whether or not it's a good idea to spend the money or not, they're just looking at, does it meet with the regulations? It doesn't end up coming to us or to the RTM as a whole unless there's a financial component. So the other distinction I'll make with this is the road to Great Island, since we've been talking about Great Island already today. What's interesting with that road is went before Planning and Zoning Commission. I don't know if you voted yet or not on it, because of the potential impacts on, there's some regrading involved, et cetera. But it is, the money that is being used for that is considered part of the appropriation we already did for the purchase of Great Island. So nothing about that project will come
Back
before
in
us.
front of you.
but should the short lane, because that will cost money?
I don't know how that was appropriated, whether that's was budgeted already and voted on in prior RTM actions, I don't know.
It might be part of the Park and Rec, when we look at the Park
It
and
might
Rec
be
budget,
part
it
of,
might be part of that.
under their budget, yeah, I would imagine it would be. But from what, stop me if I'm wrong, it's been a while since I've been on the RTM, but you do have line item authority on capital improvements.
So we will see, and that's the other reason
To the extent
why.
that there's something if that's considered a line item capital improvement, then yes, I would think we would have the line item budget.
And that's one of the other reasons why I wanted Amy to come this month, is that next month we'll have Jeremy here and we'll be going through the planning and zoning department and the building department's budgets, and there will be capital items in there as well as operating expenses. And the Park and Rec Committee of the RTM will go through the Park and Rec budget. And like I said, I haven't seen it, but I would suspect that there'll be some line items in there for those sorts of improvements as capital improvement charges.
And from, as a general RTM member, you know, it's important to understand the entire budget, you know, understand the school budget, understand the parent, even though that might not be your committee.
Yeah.
There's a lot to pay attention to,
Right.
for sure. For sure. What else am I missing as far as the nuances and the distinction between the two committees?
So the ADU will never probably come in front of us
It won't come back.
because it has nothing,
No,
it's
you've
no
opted out. It'll come in front of you as a general public.
public, yeah,
As general
but it
public.
won't be, we have nothing to vote on because there's no appropriation
No,
necessary.
though, to date, you know, so far, two things that have been changed at the state level had an opt-out provision. Future things might not have an opt-out provision, so there might not be an involvement in an RTM, say, on something. It depends on how it gets passed at the state level.
Right, and so, yeah, and that's exactly, that sort of goes back to, you know, we as it's important that we sort of are paying attention to those things, you know, and look, they're in the news, and I'm trying to, again, to pay attention to, we're in a short session, so I don't think there's gonna be as much on the planning that's gonna come through this session in the legislature, but, you know, they
One
keep
of
talking
the
about it.
things that's so unique about the town of Darien is the watershed. Is that we capture, I mean, everything comes down and, you know, Stony Brook, 5 Mile, Good Wives, you know, there's so many watersheds that come down and come through our little town to get to the Long Island Sound that we really are different than so many other municipalities in the considerations that we need to take when we develop. And that's why I'm a firm believer that we should have a say in how we develop our town.
And we're also so very highly developed.
And we are
which is the
so
other-
highly developed.
The other piece of it, which is why all of the stuff about, you know,
Yeah.
different diversity of housing, which I think, you know, the ADU is gonna start, you know, we had, in one of our other meetings, we had the housing authority come in and talk to us and talk about what's being done on that side, and that's something that's gonna continue to percolate both at the legislature level, but then also, you know, locally as well.
We have 2 major highways and the post road and the train, which all of which add a lot of other complexity.
Very much so.
Any other questions for Amy about what they're doing on the Planning and Zoning Commission while we have her here?
I also would recommend having Steve at some point, because he'll give a good overview of,
He
you
comes
know.
once a year, doesn't he?
Yeah, once a year,
Yeah.
yeah. And I think he did a great job with the town, state address, not state, the town address on, you know, summarizing the work that's been done over the past year, what's still left to be done, and a going forward basis. So I know you just had an overview of that in December. But it's interesting, the nuances. In some ways, you feel more informed as an RTM member because you get much more broader understanding and scope, and you're in general meetings where you hear about what Parks and Recs and Public Works and this. We're planning and zoning, you kind of get the blinders on a little bit. You're like, okay, and it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
It's a lot of work to prepare. You have meetings every 3 Tuesdays of the month, and there's a lot of applications to go through, so you kind of tend to go down into a tunnel. But it's just sitting here and listening to, you know, just you have a more general understanding of the happenings in town, which is great. Yeah, which I miss.
And I'll actually do a little bit of a plug. I mean, so the 3 main committees on that, there's Planning and Zoning Commission, there's the Zoning Board of Appeals, which, as Amy alluded to, they look at mainly at people who are requesting variances from the existing regulations. They also will take, if there's an approval, an administrative approval, you can take an appeal to them of that decision by someone in the town. There's the Architectural Review Board. They look mainly at commercial properties and whether or not their style is fitting with the rest of the town. And there's the Environmental Protection Commission, which really focuses on wetlands, sensitive areas. Almost all of those boards often have openings for people, and it is a pretty common pass for people to go from here to
Yep.
one of those committees. So if you're interested in any of those, unfortunately, I can't because of the work that I do, but I'm always happy to introduce you to the right people if you want to talk to them about getting involved in any of those committees. Although some of those are elected, some are appointed, there's a whole mishmash as far as that goes.
All right.
That was
Thanks,
very
Amy.
helpful,
Yeah,
thank
thank
you
you.
for clarifying it.
Good to see
I'm
you
walking
guys.
away with better understanding.
All right, thank you all. Good night, thanks.
Thanks, stay dry.
Yes, I know, it is drying up a little bit out there.
All right, so unless there's, well, I can't add anything else to the agenda, but if there was anything on anything we've discussed that anyone wants to talk about stuff? No?
Since Erica wants me to make all the motions tonight,
Yes.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
All right, thank you
Thank
all.
you, Amy.
We make a good team.